Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Brown Darrell Clinic, I'd like to thank you profusely for coming here today at such short notice. In particular, I'd like to thank Brother Glenn Simmons, who I heard on the radio early today, urging people to come by and hear what we have to say. Here today we have what I call a cross-section of Bermuda. We are all patients at one time or another, and whether you are a patient of Brown Darrell CT or not, I really do want to thank you, and I think I'm doing it on behalf of my wife as well, for coming out in this weather and at such short notice. The first person you will hear from is our lawyer, Mr. Jerome Lynch, QC, who will address you briefly.
Well, good afternoon. My task really is only to try and assist in helping people to understand why it has become necessary for the clinic to close. And the embryo of that is the fact that the Bermuda Health Council decided to cut fees for CT scanning and MRI scanning by a very significant amount to make it effectively uncommercial to operate. Now that affected not just this clinic but the hospital and anybody else who would provide those services. But of course here we have only two facilities. One is the hospital and one is the Brown Darrell Clinic. It's worth reminding ourselves that the Bermuda Health Council, created in 2004, its principal objective is to, and I quote, its general purpose is to regulate, coordinate, and enhance the delivery of health services. And the question that my clients and the Brown Darrell Clinic ask is, how is this cutting of fees so significantly enhancing the health services for people of Bermuda? And in short, it is not. Whenever the hospital have had problems with being able to provide CT scans for people who are in need of that kind of treatment or diagnostic treatment, the Brown Darrell Clinic has been able to step in to cover when they've had those problems. That will no longer be available. There are other facilities that the hospital simply do not do, which will mean that people will have to travel overseas. And it has to be, doesn't it, in a modern world, a retrograde step to actually create a situation in which a facility that has been enjoyed by so many people and to the benefit of so many people has to close. Not because they want to, they have no choice because it is no longer economic. And the one thing I want everyone to take away with them is this, is that if you think that by reducing the fees for diagnostic imaging, you are in effect cutting the costs of healthcare, that is a counterproductive approach. Because diagnostics are the way to tell whether you are ill or not. It is the method by which doctors that we all rely on are able to say, this is what's wrong with you, this is what needs to be fixed. Many years ago, when X-rays were first created, it was a privilege for those who could afford it. This is just the next stage. Diagnostic imaging, MRI scans are just the next stage, and in years to come they'll be so standard they'll be in virtually every clinic around the world. But in a society like our own, with an aging population, it is absolutely imperative that the system allows for alternative facilities such as the Brown Darrell Clinic. And our concern is that what happened here is that there appears to have been some sort of targeting by the Bermuda Health Council, ignoring as we see it their obligation to enhance medical services in this country. And they've done it by seeking to approach it in this way. There's a thing called the relative value unit. It doesn't matter what it is for your purposes, but what it amounts to is this. It's a way of calculating how you're going to pay for particular services. They purported to use that system without any consultation of any significance with those who are the most directly affected, the providers such as the Brown Darrell Clinic. But that wasn't the end of it. Because having come up with a figure, they decided, you know what? We won't have that figure. We'll slash that even more. Now, why have they done that? There can be only one reason that is that they might have done that, and that was to ensure that you effectively closed down the facility that is the Brown Darrell. So, with that having been said, I pass you over to Dr. Brown, who will no doubt be able to tell you far more about the effectiveness of this than me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerome. I hear Esme in the background repeating what she said on the radio. And what she's talking about is the fact that for years now, a chest x-ray that has been performed at Bermuda Healthcare has been paid for at 1/3 of the rate that is paid at the hospital. Despite all the protests and questions, etc., that has been the case. Now, I'm not a history teacher, but today I want to give a few history lessons. Because this thing did not start. And before I go any further, I want to thank our staff who are here today, who helped to put this together. In particular, I want to say a thank you to Renee Richardson. For those of you who don't know Renee,
Renee,
come up here.
show yourself. Oh, hi.
Renee has been with Brown Darrell CT from the beginning, and she's actually been with us for 15 years. We are now trying to figure out her future as well as ours because of what has happened. I would like to brag that Brown Darrell CT resulted from my vision, but it wasn't. It was my wife who in 2008, while I was premier, said, you know what? We are serving the people of Bermuda with MRI, and it seems to be doing well. People are benefiting from it. I noticed that the hospital has a very old CT machine. And so we did our research, and we looked at each other and said, are you willing to take this risk? And we decided that from a business standpoint, it would make sense. But from a service standpoint, it made even more sense. Because as Mr. Lynch has said, in a community like this that brags about being first world and all of that, it is very, very unfortunate when you don't have what we call redundancy, a backup for your service. I will give you an example very quickly of how it can happen, and God forbid it should never happen to any one of us. If a doctor suspects that a patient has had a stroke, there are two kinds of strokes. One that's caused from a blockage by a clot, and another that's caused by bleeding. The only way that you're going to know what kind of stroke that particular patient is having is through a CT scan.
Yes.
If you make a mistake and it is a bleeding stroke, and you give the patient a blood thinner, the outcome is most unfortunate. And so we take pride in saying that for the 10 years that we've been here, we have always said yes to King Edward whenever they've had a problem. And we all have problems with electronics. They go down at times. And whenever we've gone down, they back us up. And it's been a very good arrangement. But for 10 years, we have provided CAT scans at for the same fee that the hospital has been paid. So there's been no difference in terms of that fee. We have had a number of technicians, but there have been two Bermudians who have worked here from day one, and that is Renee and Dr. McPhee. Dr. McPhee is over 90 now, but he said he's not finished. And so he works here in the mornings, and his job is to observe patients who are undergoing injections of dye, etc., He's done a fantastic job. So we'll have to find something for him to do. A little history about the Bermuda Health Council. First of all, I admit it was started by a PLP government. I personally told my colleagues at the time that unless it was very carefully crafted, it was going to be a problem. And the reason that it was going to be a problem was that just as lawyers would not like it if non-legal persons were in charge of regulating them, then so do doctors feel that those who regulate us should be doctors, at least for the most part. I have absolutely no problem with patient input or decisions being made by groups, insurance companies, all of us together. I have no issue with that whatsoever. In fact, those of you who know me, those of you who know about my political position, I said 10 years ago that if you really want to lower health costs in Bermuda, cut all of us by 10% and save $70 million. When they did not do that, I knew that they had something else in mind. Remember these names: Jennifer Attride Sterling, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health; Tawana Wedderburn, CEO of the Health Council; and Ricky Brathwaite, so-called health economist; Trevor Monis, and Richard Ambrosio. I want you to remember those names. If you look back at the actions of the Health Council over the past 4 or 5 years, you will see a list of things that have been rejected by the public. You will remember the attempt to have pre-certification, where you would have to call an 800 number before you could get cleared for your test. That was pushed back by the people. The second thing was mammograms. Of course, you remember the bras hanging on the cabinet grounds wall. And a number of other steps that have been attempted by the brains of the same people. But it didn't start with that. Let me take you back to 2013, when Ms. Attride Sterling said to me in a meeting, "We are going to cut the cost of health care in Bermuda." And I said, fine. And we're going to start with diagnostic imaging. And I said, why are you picking on us? And she said, quote, "Because you are low-hanging fruit." Because you are low-hanging fruit. And she kept her promise. Kept working, and finally found a government, and it's not the PLP government. She finally found an OBA government that was sympathetic and loved the idea of putting Dr. Brown out of business. And so this time she was able to succeed, and that is what has happened. Consultation. In politics, if you talk to ministers and people in government, they'll tell you there are a lot of different kinds of consultation. Mr. Ferbert from the union knows about consultation. You can have consultation that lasts 5 minutes. You can have consultation that's done on a phone call. But the real consultation involves all the parties concerned. Well, let me tell you that I have never, ever sat at a table to discuss the reduction of diagnostic imaging fees. Never. However, God is good. And sometimes you have friends in places and you don't even know who they are. I have an email today, and I don't have to keep it confidential because even though it's stamped confidential, it wasn't sent to me. So I don't have to keep it confidential. This is an email sent from the Bermuda Health Council on the 21st of February 2017. It was sent to Argus, BF&M, Colonial, GEHI, HID, and the Bermuda Hospitals Board. Please be advised that further to the memo of the 3rd of February and the email of the 15th of February, the minister has revised the standard premium rate. On, and it says, the information is being shared with you in advance in confidence to allow adequate time for preparation. Bermuda Hospital Board fees will be changed and aligned with RVU methodology. Some segments of fees are expected to increase, for example, operating room, and others will decrease, dialysis, labs, and diagnostic imaging. And so when they cut the hospital and Brown Darrow with CT, they then puffed up the fees for the operating room to make it look like they had done something to the hospital and me, and therefore we were even Steven. But like my mother said, because my ears are long, don't make me a donkey. The goal was to put Brown Darrow out of business. And the first press release, the very first press release that the Health Council issued said clearly, there's no need for another CT scan in Bermuda. All of it can be done at the hospital. That was quickly withdrawn, and another press release was made. Now, I have to tell you that I've been in the service business, and I've been in service for a long time. I look out there and I see people that I started treating in 1990. Yes. And it has always been my primary interest to serve the people of wherever I was working. I know that service is not servitude, and so I was very comfortable serving the people. Some people believe that when you serve people well, that you should reduce your service according to the amount of money that is received. I'm not one of those people. This discussion is really not about money. It's about service. And of course, yes, as business people, we expect our business to be viable. But that's the only way that we can serve people, is for the business to be viable. Some say, Brown, you're just paranoid. And I say, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get me. I don't have to go through the history with you of what has been done and what is being done to make life difficult for me and my family. This is just another example. Now, in the last few days, there have been some numbers thrown around about the cost of health care, the cost of insurance premiums. You've seen that. I'm still trying to understand why it was going to cost $23.03 for each Bermudian with private insurance if the fees remained as they've been for the past 10 years. If something has been going on for 10 years and there's nothing new being introduced, no new charges, what causes the premium to have to go up? And I'm still waiting for an answer to that question. And if $23 was saved, how many of you saw $23 go off your premium?
Nobody.
I know we didn't.
That's right.
I know Zane tells me his business didn't. The only reduction was a $4 reduction in future care. And if everybody in Bermuda was on future care, it would only be $3 million a year. So where did that money go? I asked the question, where did the money go? And I'm going to answer that question in part by saying the Bermuda Health Council, Jerome, you read the purpose legislatively,
Yeah.
but the Bermuda Health Council has been functioning as a collection agency for the insurance companies. And here is my proof. You all are familiar with the name and shame list that they say they're going to print for employers who don't pay the premium. Yes. Last year, I attended a public meeting, and Ms. Wedderburn introduced a young man who proudly explained that X number of companies were told that they better pay their premiums. Now, this is not the function of the Bermuda Health Council, that they better pay their premiums. And we were successful, he said, in getting those premiums paid. So I put my hand up and I said, well, what did you do with the money? He said, we gave it to the insurance company. I said, well, why don't you come over to Bermuda Healthcare and do collections for us? So I believe that the Health Council, as one of its flaws, has forgotten its function.
Yes.
They are not the handmaidens of the insurance industry.
That's right.
In fact, I'll give you another piece of history. One of the reasons the Health Council was formed was because the late Nelson Bascom and the late Eugene Cox could not agree on how to regulate the insurance company with respect to health. That's how it started. And they can go around and ask everybody who was in cabinet at the time, and they'll tell them not to act as a collection agency for insurance companies. And I wonder why you have that kind of relationship with the insurance companies. Bermudians are going to lose jobs. Not a high number of people, but people who deserve to be working are going to lose their jobs. And we're going to do the best we can to assist them. But I must say in closing that if doctors had a stronger presence at the table, this decision would never have been made. The decision was made by the OBA government, and I want to publicly thank the Progressive Labor Party government for trying to help out. But for us, it was too little, too late. And I think it was important for us to come here today and to explain to you that this service is a very important and vital health service. You may think you are in the greatest of health right now, but if you have any hypertension in your family, etc., and most of you do, then stroke is something that we need to get on top of right away. This action removes an alternative to the hospital. It removes choice for people who prefer a private environment. And I just want to say to you once again that the support that you have shown us, not just by coming here today, but with your phone calls and emails, has been absolutely overwhelming. And I want you to know that we might be down, But we're not out. I'll take questions.
Good afternoon, Dr. Brown and your panel, Ciola Wilson for Bermuda Real and TNN. Let's go straight to the big elephant in the room. You have members of Minister here with you and a veteran PLP MP, the Premier, and Minister that you went to see regarding this in the lead up to the last election are the very people that you have led. The current government that got elected on a mandate that said Bermuda for Bermudians and empowering entrepreneurs are facing some flack from the public about the political motivation of this thing from the concept. And when the Minister of Health appeared live on Sherry Simmons yesterday or Monday, a number of people expressed that they, although they listened to the minister's explanation, they're not having it. So how does it look for the new government, which you were a leader of, not fixing something that appears to be systemically incorrect?
It's a good question. First of all, I'm a life member of the Progressive Labor Party. I'm a former premier and leader of the Progressive Labor Party. I am not here today to bash the PLP. I thank the premier for what he has done. If he finds it possible, others find it possible to fix this situation, then I would hope that they would do so. I am available to discuss health care with anyone at any time.
Okay, I have one further question. My difficulty from a patient perspective is, how do you justify in the name of reducing costs? Don't patients have a right to option? Like, right, this consequence means my only option is to go to the hospital.
Well, that is what Ms. Attright Sterling wants. She wants the business to be driven to the hospital, whereas all over the world, care is being taken from the hospital to allow the hospital to concentrate on only the work that it can do, acute care. But her theory is to drive it, at least diagnostic imaging, to the hospital.
And in response to your initial report with Bermuda Real, I've had a number of inbox messages asking you to clarify what you meant when you said the PLP has been able to replenish to the tune of 200,000 out of 600,000.
Yeah.
Can you explain?
No, I don't want to discuss exact figures here today.
Okay.
All I will tell you, and the media have been, you will receive a packet that
Yes.
explains a lot. And it is public knowledge that the government gave grants to the hospital and to Brown Darrell to assist us. So there was some assistance given to us after they looked and noticed that apparently, and I think Minister Wilson said this on the radio, that the technical officers recommended one thing and then the political people decided on another.
Can I say something about that?
Yes.
In order to assist with the difficulty that is experienced, and a lot of people are concerned about the monies that have been paid out by way of this grant, can I say this? Two things arise. First of all, there is a real prospect that had they not done so, they would have faced legal action and would have cost a considerable amount more. And the only reason that they've done it is because when this new government looked at what the old government had done, they found that there was not only this relative value unit assessed as to what should be paid per diagnostic image, but they then slashed that for apparently no reason. And so there was no possible argument that you could sustain that was not politically driven as to why you had taken a completely independent technical assessment of what the rate should have been and then slash it further. By virtue of that, driving the business of Brown Darrell out of business. And let me add this one point to it, because it's very important. The effect was also on the hospital. The hospital have had its fees cut by the same amount. They have lost millions. The difference is nobody's going to let the hospital go out of business. You can't. You know, and so what happens? The government would have to step in to help the hospital. And if the old government had stayed in power, that's exactly what would have happened. Only they wouldn't have done anything for Mr. Brown and the Brown Darrell Clinic. You can be sure of that.
Dr. Brown, you have overcome many obstacles and challenges through your life. I know you're not one to lay down and play dead. What's your next move?
I don't know what the next move is. You know, this is a moving target, as I used to tell people in tourism. Working in government is like trying to paint a moving train. You know, you have to lean out the window and paint. You can't stop the train. So we would always look forward to meaningful consultation, and because you know that's been our record for years with respect to MRI. We accepted a 20% shortfall compared to the hospital. We accepted it. And part of the reason we accepted it was that was our contribution to helping to lower the cost of healthcare, because we could have pushed and said we want the same as the hospital, which is what we did with CT.
For those who are a bit younger in our social media audience who may not recall the history, but how does it feel all these many moons since the young Dr. Brown was trying to qualify just to work here, had to leave Bermuda, was subjected to a lot of things similar to Dr. Gordon, and here we are in 2018. It would appear that the black professional is still dealing with the same elephant in Bermuda's room.
Well, it's not just the black professional. It's the black professional who is out of hand.
Okay, I was trying to be.
Yeah, but I'm saying what it is. It's the black professional who will not bend over. And I will not do it. And if this is what it is, God won't give me any more than I can handle.
Dr. Braun, from a political standpoint, can the present government, legally or otherwise, legislation, whatever, can rectify this situation? Or we're just hoping that the hospital folks will change their mind? I'm confused.
Well, it has nothing to do with the hospital
Okay.
people. The government, you know, I will leave the government with its options. The government is
Okay.
quite aware of its options, and I'm not here today to try to tell them what to do.
No.
You know, one of the things that they did just before the election, I don't know how many of you noticed it, but 2 days or 3 days before the election, there was an interview in the Royal Gazette with Mark Bean. And Mark told the reporter, said, "You don't know how powerful Brown is." He said he runs the PLP, he runs Bermuda. You know, now that wasn't a mistake. That was done so that when I came to respond to something later, people would say, "He ain't telling me what to do."
It was a set.
So in other words, it was set in place to be like that. And I understand it because I'm a lot of things, but one thing I am is a political animal.
I have one further question, and you probably have more understanding than me. There's a perception that permanent secretaries and senior civil servants are beyond reproach, so to speak. Can you just help me understand in layman's terms, how is it that a permanent secretary has this much?
Well, I was going to talk about that earlier. Let me explain to you. It's not unusual. Anyone, if someone that works in engineering and they've been in that department for a long, long time, and they have a certain personality, eventually they can have more influence than it was intended. In government, the civil servant who stays in a department can quite easily, especially with the change of ministers, can quite easily establish himself or herself as an authority. And it takes a very, I would say, strong minister to come in and to say, wait a minute.
Okay, so I know we're under the Westminster system, but is it perhaps time, like in America, when, say, the presidency changes from Democrat to Republican, all those head honchos go out the door with the outgoing president?
No, that's not the British system. The Westminster.
But I mean, is there a British version?
The colonial system. The colonial system is that the civil service remains. In fact, some civil servants have told me, ministers may come and go, but we stay.
Dr. Brown, do you feel that the makeup of the health council should have more physicians and doctors than lay persons?
Well, yes, I think that the largest contingent of people on the health council should be providers. If they're not physicians, they can be. Yeah, there are two doctors, I think, who are on the health council at the moment. But who was it who said the other day that? Dr. Doling said on the radio the other day that we have people running healthcare who've never seen a patient.
Bean counters.
Dr. Brown, you've spoken about how you work with the hospital when the machine breakdown occurs. What concerns should patients have if there's now no alternative backup?
Well, my objective today is not to be an alarmist, but to tell you the truth. The truth is that if the system goes down and there is no backup, there's no backup. And the patient has to do the best that he or she can do. There's no real good reason, to tell you the truth, point blank. There's no real good medical reason or even economic reason for targeting us like this and trying to and forcing us to close down. There's no good justification other than a vendetta that has been in play since 2013 and has not been diagnosed as such by people who could have stopped it.
Dr. Brown,
Yes.
we are here. We, the people, are not going to allow this to go down and be shut. Now, there is something that we are going to do and we must needs do. We're not going to sit back and roll over and say because this Sterling or the lady, whoever it was, the BHC, who had this, your rates, and someone called and said, Esme, call the radio again, tell them what the rates were. They were paying for a scan or whatever it was.
A chest x-ray.
Chest x-ray, $335 to the hospital and $66 to Dr. Brown for the same thing. We're not going to tolerate that. We are here to support, and we know what's wrong, and we know what's happening, and we're going to say we, the people of this island, are not going to permit a group of people who want to just shut you down, and then you all hear me?
Yes.
All right. We are doing this. Now, we are going to do something. If we got to march or wherever it is, the BHC, wherever it is, that's got to be done. We are going to be at 31 until the 31st. Something's going to be done. If we got to go to the premier and to the health minister, something's got to be done. If it means shuffling that minister, something's got to be done. And you bring in another group. If you have a new minister with a new group of people who appoint the people to that BHC, that must be done. And Richard Winchell, who was on, I don't know how. Can I say his name?
Yeah.
I said it already. He was against and fought vociferously against Tanae Furbert in constituency 4. How would he now then be appointed as on a BHC commission? How could that happen? And if the minister had something to do with that, something is wrong. Okay? So he should not be there. And his fighting against.
Take it easy.
Lord have mercy.
I'm done now. No, you're all right.
All right, we gotta take it from here. We are taking it from. We the people are taking it from here.
That's right. You got it in here.
What is the Bermuda Medical Doctors Association saying about this? Are there other doctors who are coming out and supporting it?
A lot of doctors, many doctors, have written to me in support, but they've known about this for some time. We issued to the media last night a statement that came from the Bermuda Medical Doctors Association during the summer about this. They said they were very concerned. We have since written back to the Medical Doctors Association asking them to express their concern in some way to help a member. you know, because I am a member of the Bermuda Medical Doctors Association, and I think that they should represent me. They are my union.
I have a question. I'm following Michael's question here. If we had recently a concern about the level of diabetes in this country, and I think it was called an epidemic, one of the things that could result from diabetes is stroke.
Yes.
And I don't understand the thinking behind, on the one hand, saying the level of diabetes is catastrophic. I think that's one word I heard also used. And then at the same time to say that a resource that can be used to mitigate against persons who may, as a result of diabetes, have stroke is going to be shut down. What we're saying, what seems to be said, is that get in line. If we shut down this facility, then anybody who needs to have a CT gets in that long line of people who need to have CT. And my understanding, because I'm not medical at all, is that the sooner the better.
Yes.
So if 10 people have the necessity to have a CT scan and there's only one scan, there's going to be a line. Wouldn't it make? I think there are two.
Yeah,
Wouldn't it make sense to have more than one?
Yeah, I think that there are 2 units at the hospital. All right, but with electronics, many times, as one goes, the other one goes. Plumbing can be a problem, as was the case at King Edward once when everything went down. But you know, I will say to you that there's one person, I normally don't discuss patients, but he gave me permission to say this. My cousin, Cal Smith, was diagnosed right inside this building in just a nick of time. And we were able to detect exactly what was causing his problem. And we could go on and on, but I'm not here to brag about how good we are. You know, I'm here to just tell you that it's a shame that this is being allowed, and it's being explained away as something that benefits the people of Bermuda. If you have this, therefore your insurance premium is going to go up. You have to question that.
Oh, no.
You have to question that.
Right.
There's no one thing that could cause an insurance premium to go up by $20 in 1 year. No one has answered that question. Yes, ma'am.
I would just like to say that I have come to Brown Darrow Clinic and had all of my CAT scan and whatever done for years. And it was this CAT scan that found cancer on my kidney and got me out of here in enough time to have it removed without having to take chemo and radiation. So I appreciate this clinic, and whatever you have to do to keep it open, I'll be right there with you.
We're going to do it.
Esme, can I, in response to Esme's impassioned plea, can I just remind everybody that the Bermuda Health Council Act in 2004, under Section 7, says this: the minister may give general directions as to policy to be followed by the BHEC in the performance of its functions in the public interest. Write to the minister. Ask them to exercise that power over the Bermuda Health Council.
Thank